What I did today was an outline for my studies and research, which got started when I noticed some pretty scary pro-Nazi symbolism in Reagan's Red Scare movies, which I began to document since I wasn't in school. I had some time, and eventually it became a contest of legitimacy when it came to school because Seattle didn't want me to attend. They banned me because of the research I was doing. So when I found a college that was willing to allow me to go to school for school's term, um, despite the fact that I was doing this research on my own time, they asked me if I would be willing to give a historic paper on the foundation of my concerns, and it was easy to do because Paul Robeson was a perfect man for the setting and the time and the politics of the era. So I did a paper on Paul Robeson and showed the way he was surrounded by a Hollywood syndicate that did not have his best interests in mind, did not have America's best interests in mind. They were moguls who were racist and militaristic and thrived on the spectacles of bloodshed. Well, I began to do more research into the background of these cinema personalities internationally, reading about UFA, the German cinema, the 30s, and there's two books about Hitler's Hollywood. One of them is called The Collaboration, which was pretty dark for a title about American cinema. The other is called Hollywood and Hitler. And I found that there's a leapfrog super story of four elements in the background of Japanese, French, German, American, British film. And I made these film project telltale clips in order to discuss this with the people and further my research. And it spans back to the beginning of cinema. A counterfeiting done in Fayoum, where the Italian celebrity D'Annunzio introduced D.W. Griffith to Mussolini, or Luigi Ferretti, his acolyte, did. So the era of the great dictators in the Hollywood studio system got off the ground in this fascist counterfeiting done in Fayoum. And I began looking at the timelines because if you look at the 80s, well, let's say the 60s, Aleister Crowley appears on the cover of Sgt. Pepper's, and you think that that's just an eccentricity, but friends of the Beatles, King Crimson, put out a record with a song titled based on Aleister Crowley's book, Moonchild. So this goes to the centerpiece of how they thought. One of them was David Bowie's guitarist, and he introduced me to people who were under the occupied Paris with Gurdjieff, which meant Ouspensky. Ouspensky was a thinker who published in the New Age editorials of 1917, 18, 1919. And when you look at that era of letters with Ouspensky and when D'Annunzio was in Fayoum, Ezra Pound was writing about him in the New Age. You see the periscope of the psychology of cinema sticking up, but the whole submarine, the whole works come up out of the water in 1980. So I started to look carefully at the New Age newspaper and discovered that they had a spiritual conversation going on, which had an idea of a seance conversation with people like D'Annunzio as a seance, and they were using symbols of Lazarus. Houdini was around in those days. Casper, the friendly ghost, back from the dead. Blythe Sanders was very important. His assumed name means blaze from the cinders. And he only had one arm, so this is about the invisible arm. And all of this has significance, not just in the way that it shades innocent people's lives. Picasso was a friend of Stravinsky. I'm doing set designs for him, the Cubist movement. But the way that the Italian fascists, Italian futurists, I should say, around Marinetti, embraced enthusiastically the excitement of the great dictator's challenge. I don't doubt that some of them changed their minds when they saw what it really meant. But there were people, not just Paul Robeson, but Ignazio Silone. He was an anti-fascist who made the observation that thirst and drought were recruiting for Mussolini, but it was insufficient to regard fascism as necessity and cooperation as the mother of invention. He didn't like fascism. He hid in barns and he was wounded, and he stood up for the Italian peasant. And when you compare Ignazio Silone with D'Annunzio, you're talking about two men who made different claims on the loyalties of the spirituality and reason of Italian peasants in times of danger. Paul Robeson was in some ways closer to D'Annunzio because he was breaking the color barrier in Hollywood, and he was bringing a humanized vision of human potential to a notoriously racist culture of people who asserted their power after they were defeated in the Civil War and then did it again after World War II. So, looking at these people from the New Age newspaper has found me looking at the script of the Texas school book, which of course is a pretty serious matter for me because I was tortured and my name is on it. And one of the perpetrators is just, friendly in the community, I guess you would say, talks about forces impinging on the persona's experience. It was a cruel manufacture of a bad conscience to use me for an item to pass around with women who wanted to sleep with me so that they could score on me. A cruel item, and they claim that what they did was in good conscience. Forces impinging on the persona's experience, subjecting the persona to successive degradations, is what they wrote about what they were doing. And it's powerfully reminiscent of UFA in Germany in 1933, their doctrine of what they called forcible coordination. That forcible coordination of destructive behaviors in good conscience is what Hollywood would like us to believe these coordinators are doing. So when we look at our politics, we ask, who were the coordinators of this. Bush looks to appear to be a coordinator. I came to their attention, I think, because my father was on the Bush ship CVL 30 in the Navy. And Network, when the film came out, seems to have a lot of augury about the people who were involved in hotwiring this Hollywood script and the forcible coordination of Axis remnants working a plan. So I think while it may be easier to compare Paul Robeson to D'Annunzio than Silone's book Fontamera to the place of Fayum, I think that the issues are complementary on all sides. I don't know that Robeson and Silone had ever heard of each other, but they were contemporaries, and they were both well-rounded anti-fascists, which makes for interesting contemplation because people who come up against the edge of the issues create a sort of frictive identity politics that lacks identity. It's important to look at well-rounded men who encountered the preposterous threat to spirit and reason that fascism obviously is.